Welcome back. If you're a vehicle owner, you've probably received a email that sounds a little bit like this. Based on our service records for your vehicle and the manufacturer's recommendations, we suggest that you replace your spark plugs. The cost for doing that is $226.52. I read that correctly. Now, this vehicle doesn't have 25 spark plugs. It's a four-cylinder engine. It's got 4 spark plugs. Now, those of you who know me know that I'm a mechanically inclined individual, and I'm not averse to working on such things as the internals of my guns, rebedding a stock, and I don't mind tearing apart engines. The first time I tore apart an engine, I was 11 years old when I repaired my father's lawnmower engine, his Briggs & Stratton engine. I replaced the rings on it. And I've been working with engines and cars and trucks ever since. But having said that, one does not have to be mechanically inclined to replace a bottle cap on a ketchup bottle. One does not need to be mechanically inclined to remove a spark plug by unscrewing it and putting it back in again. You can certainly save yourself an awful lot of money. $226.52 is a fantastic amount of money to change 4 spark plugs for what I consider to be probably, at the most, it would take a person a half hour. Now, having said that, some vehicles certainly have difficulties with regard to access of the spark plug. Getting at them sometimes is the most difficult thing of all, because they've got so much jammed underneath the hood now. It's not like the old days when you had these big old Buicks and Chevrolets and all that stuff, where you opened up the hood, and if you were a skinny enough kid, you could get down between the engine and the fender well, and you could work on it that way. That's not the case anymore. You barely can fit a soda straw in a vacant space underneath that hood now. It's very, very tight. But just the same, I want to take you through the process of changing the plugs on this 2013 Kia Optima. And what I'm doing here is not going to be much different than you find throughout the industry. It's going to be, there's an awful lot of similarities now, regardless of what brand of vehicle. So whether this is a turbo or a standard 2.4 liter GDI engine, which is on my wife's Kia, it doesn't make much difference. The process is essentially the same, and you might have to modify things according to your particular vehicle. So let's step over the car and see how simple this process is. All right, let's run down the list of things that we're going to have. Obviously, you need to have your replacement spark plugs. Now, for those of you who have never dealt with spark plugs before, these are very, very engine specific. For each application, there's a different plug, and you must get the exact plug which is recommended by the manufacturer and specified. Now, these happen to be the Autolite iridiums. Iridium refers to the central electrode, what it's made from. These are very, very long life. I've got thousands and thousands of miles on this particular engine with the plugs that are installed. They're probably Denso plugs because that was the original manufacturer equipment. Denso plugs are wonderful plugs, but and they're OEM, but Autolite were about 1/4 of the price. And I've had very good luck with Autolite plugs throughout my life. So I'm going to save myself a little bit of money, and we'll see how they work. If they don't last as long, then a lesson learned, but I'm still saving quite a bit of money by purchasing that brand. A little bit of anti-seize lubricant on spark plug threads is very, very highly recommended. You don't want to go down the road with where I have been, where you get a spark plug thread seized in an engine block. That's a horror show you want to avoid at all costs. That happened to me back in the early 70s with an old Chevy Caprice, and I lost, the plug broke off in the engine block, and removal of it is a very difficult process. So, a little bit of anti-seize lubricant. To remove the clip that holds the electrode, the terminal on the end of the plug, I'll need a 10mm socket for this particular engine. make sure you have a wire style feeler gauge, because you want to check the gap on the plugs. Now the manufacturer of the plug recommends a .043 gap, and I can check that with these feeler gauges. Now, always get the ones with the wire. Do not use a flat feeler gauge, and by all means do not use the old style wedge gauge, which it looks like a circular coin with a ramp around it. That was fine for adjusting the old heavy copper plugs, but they're definitely not suitable for the very fine, fragile electrode that's used in these iridium plugs. And you need to have the appropriate spark plug socket. Now, a spark plug socket is entirely different than standard sockets. You could use a 5/8 inch long, I should say a deep socket. But the problem is that you won't have any way to retrieve that plug from its deep recess inside the engine. And a lot of engines right now, the way they're designed, the plug is down inside 4 to 6 or more inches inside the engine block, and to retrieve it would require a little bit of manipulation. So this is a special socket, which is a 5/8 inch, and inside it has a very strong magnet which will keep that plug in place, both removing the old one from the engine and inserting the new one so that it doesn't just fall down inside. And it also keeps it in place so that you can start your threads correctly. Now, why not use the old style rubber grommet inside the spark plug socket? Well, I'll tell you, over time, those rubber grommets will start to lose their grip as they get a little bit soiled from repeated use. Just a tiny little bit of grease on them, and they slip off of the plug. And so it's the magnetic style is really, I feel, superior. They won't wear out. This one happens to be made by Gear Wrench. It's got a universal in the top of it here, which means you don't have to use your own universal. It's very compact. I don't know, this looks like it probably will reach all the way down and give me plenty of room. It's got a little knurled shaft here so I can twirl it. I kind of doubt that I'll be able to reach that, but we'll see how it goes. And it's a 3/8 inch drive, so I've got the appropriate 3/8 inch ratchet, and I've got an extension if I need it, and if I want to use this style wrench to twirl it back, that's fine too. And I'll also be using a headlamp. I really like to have a headlamp so that I'm not trying to hold a flashlight or somehow or another position a light down inside a hole. This looks where I'm looking, so this is a very, very good. I think this is probably one of the best $14 I ever spent. It's just it's chargeable with a USB cord. So we'll get right at it. Now, I try to keep the car pretty clean under the hood because it helps make things easier for servicing at any time. And one of the things that I do is I pay attention to lubricating the holding mounts, the studs. There are 4 studs on this engine here, on the top of the engine, male studs which fit into these receptacles here. These are just simply rubber grommets, and those rubber grommets can get pretty sticky, and if they're not kept clean and lubricated, you'll really have a difficult time lifting this bonnet off the engine. So as you can see, this one pops on and off very easily. I recommend that you get yours off and apply a little bit of WD-40 to those studs and to the rubber so that it keeps them in good shape. So now, what we're looking at right now are the top of 4 cylinders, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each of these now has its own electrical connection at the top. These electrical plugs have to be disconnected. So right down here, I'm going to bring you in closer so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, right here at the top of the first plug, you'll notice there's an electrical terminal with the wires coming into it. This gray clip pulls straight to the rear. It requires just a slight pull to detach it from there's a clip right there. You can slide it straight back in line with the plug. Once you've done that, you'll notice at the top of that plug, there's this black element right here, this black clip. That black plastic clip, simply you push that straight down forcibly and withdraw. When you push that down, that detaches the clip that's inside. So you push that straight down from the farthest point this way. In other words, you want to press that pedal down and then slide this plug right off. This is the most difficult part, I think, of the entire operation. The firing order is the same as indicated on this harness right here, the electrical harness. So there's no chance of me, well, it certainly is a chance to do it if I cross-wired them, but this harness right here tells me exactly where they have to go back. So I'm going to continue along. I'm going to slide those clips back individually and remove the plug. There's 4 of them. This one's a little bit, there it is, a little stiff. But again, I should be able to just press down and pull those right off. Okay, so with my 10mm socket, I'll loosen up each of these. One thing also too, before you open up your engine, and when you remove a spark plug, you're opening up your engine to one of the most vital parts inside. You don't want to get any dirt whatsoever into your cylinder. And the best way to avoid that is by taking care to, I always make sure that whenever I clean the engine off, I take an air hose and I blow off some of these recesses where leaves and debris can accumulate. And right now, I will in fact give that a shot of air. That will ensure that I don't have any contaminants fall down inside. Now once I've removed those, I can simply pull straight up, and that allows me to remove this is the connector that goes on top. I'll bring that in a little bit closer so you can see it. It's got a boot on the bottom right here. You want to make sure that boot is clean and has no cracks. It's a rubber boot. That just slides down on top of the spark plug insulator and holds itself in place, and the electrical connection is inside. So just inspect it and make sure that everything is the way it ought to be. And we'll do that on each of them. They're not in any particular order, but still it's not a bad idea to put the ones back into the same receptacles that they came from. So I'll lay them out in order after I inspect them. Looks good. Now I'm going to set up my wrench, see how much reach I have. Take off my 10mm socket. And again, keep that aligned toward the center, and okay, I got that started. Now I'm going to take my socket off, or wrench off I should say, and screw it by hand. Here's our plug, and let's take a look. Underneath that ground strap, you'll notice that there's a little bit of, it's almost like a stalactite that has formed, you know, like you get in a cave, that is transferring metal from one to the other. So this plug has definitely seen its days and it should be replaced. And this one happened to be a Denso, as a matter of fact. So it's given very good service, and the car is still running fine. Now last night I pre-gapped each of these plugs and checked them out to the required 0.043 gap, and actually they were factory gapped, but you always have to check. It's the mechanic's responsibility to ensure that the gap set at the factory is correct and is accordance with the specified gap for the manufacturer. I'm going to be installing permatex anti-seize thread lubricant on each of these plugs, and it doesn't require much. Just a small drop goes a long way, and just work it into the threads. Don't have any excess on there because it makes a hideous mess, and you don't want to have any contamination that gets onto your electrode. So I'm going to do that with the remaining 3 spark plugs, and we'll start threading them into place. Okay, now I reverse the process and simply put my plug straight down in. Be careful not to bang things around. This is not a time to, you want to use a little bit of gentle manipulation, and always start by turning with your fingers. Don't ever use a socket wrench to put these in. You want to turn them in with your fingers until they're all the way down to the lock washer. This is why it's good to use a little bit of anti-seize lubricant, because those threads can be a little bit sticky sometimes. So now once I've come to the end, this is imperative. Do not use a torque wrench. Do not go any further than exactly a half a turn with your wrench. So I'm going to place it in. Take note of where I am. I'm going to go 1/2 turn from finger tight. Period. That's all there is to it. We're going to repeat that with the remaining ones, and we'll be all done. Okay, this is our last one. I got it into finger tight. Now, again, no more than 1/2 turn. And when I say no more than 1/2 turn, this one here stopped dead at 1/4 of a turn. Do not turn it any farther than that. This is not a mechanical part that's holding anything in place other than itself. So that lock washer that's provided by the manufacturer for this plug will hold it in place forever. So now we just want to replace those. Now we want to just clean off any dirt that you might see on them. These are all been cleaned off, so I can go ahead and push them straight down until they snap into place and into each compartment. Orient the retaining bolts in the right direction. That one's in, and the last one finally into its recess. Okay, now I want to install my 10mm bolts. Always start a bolt or a nut with at least 3 turns with your fingers. That way there it will reveal whether you've got anything cross-threaded, because if you cross-thread something and you put the pressure of a wrench on there, it won't take very long to cross-thread and wreck your threads, and you'll be out. Wind them into place. This does not take much torque, just sensible pressure on the wrench. This is only a plastic part with a brass bushing inside, folks, so you know, use common sense. It's just, you don't need to use a torque wrench to know that that does not want to turn anymore. All there is to it. It's not going to bounce loose. And following the same firing order that is on the harness, just reinstall these clips. And put the gray securing clip into place. The job is done. So there you have it. In probably less than 20 minutes actual work, I showed you how you can change your plugs, and in this case here I saved myself $225. Just think about that, what you can buy with $225, or maybe take a trip or something, or buy a couple of meals out for your family. You don't need to throw away your money frivolously by giving it to some dealership that wants to charge you an exorbitant amount for what amounts to basically 15 to 20 minutes work for one of their employees, and they're not paying him $225, $250. So there you go. Everything's back together again. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and God bless. Benny, come out here. Good boy. There he is. He's been out here the whole time. Take care now.